So, so, so what do you think about the value of the college education these days? Like in what you see at in your like life and in your work, in younger people that you teach at your, in your faculty work and whatever. What do you think? You think it's really important or no?
So I'd say it's a challenge, right? It's definitely important. You have a lot more universities here, a lot more ways to get a college education. But the old standard of a college education and why you get a college standard, I think
Mhm.
that is being redefined now.
Yeah.
So before, you were, let's go 80s, 1980s, right? You were going to college because that, got you into a job and, it was excelling you into management and so forth, right? Um, you know, you get into the 90s, more people going to college, 2000s, more people going to college. Now you have an influx of college educated people,
Mhm.
but I wouldn't say so much a influx of corporately prepared college graduates.
Mhm.
And now being on this side of things as a professor,
Mhm.
I get people that come from so many different backgrounds, right?
Mhm.
And at an HBCU, we get a lot of, I guess the challenge, well, not a challenge, but the HBCU environment is just so diverse.
Mhm.
So, I have, students from, like Latino backgrounds, Caucasian students, clearly African American students, and then African students.
Mhm.
When you put these various backgrounds together in a classroom, depending on where you come from and
Mhm.
the just the education and values and standards from your high school,
Mhm. It
um,
varies.
it varies. So you come into college and, I'll speak from my own experience. I went to Drexel University for my first year, and my first semester, first term was chem, calc, physics, engineering. I had a entrepreneurship class. I had a English class, and then I had 3 recitation classes.
Mhm.
Now, my first term, I failed terribly. Like, um, it was a lot of work. I was one of those students that as long as I go to class and listen, I absorb and I pass. Going into the college environment was totally different.
Mm.
So first semester, did terrible. Second semester, I got pretty much all straight A's. Once I figured out
Once
the
you figured out how
process
the whole process was and everything, yeah.
yeah. Now, hindsight, what I realized is that a lot of the students that came to Drexel, their first or that freshman year of physics, for engineering,
Mhm.
for physics, chemistry, and calculus, they had those classes already in high school.
Mm.
So me, I had pre-calc, I had chemistry, I had, physics, but it wasn't to a top, like it wasn't an AP level.
I
So
think it's just because of the kind of school you were at. Like it might depend on the high school that you come from.
no, I come from one of the best high schools probably in Chester County. So
Okay.
it was why I was able to be successful in college for most of the part. They taught me how to study. They taught me how to excel in class, but
Okay.
I never was pushed to an honors level.
Hmm.
So what I realized is that going in the Drexel, some like, these kids are getting hammered and, they're not spending much time studying,
Hmm.
but they're passing, these courses with straight A's and B's, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, they were prepped for it.
Hmm.
My third semester, because
Hmm.
Drexel does tri-semesters, I went into computer science.
Hmm.
And I had a C++ programming class. Struggled after the second week, had no idea how these students, like they're doing all this, but they had programming in high school,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
so from the African American perspective, and again, this is all of like recent, I guess I'm thinking of the word here. Like this is a recent epiphany of mine, right?
Hmm.
Where I wondered why I went to school for engineering. And It was because I come where, well, my family's from Cheney University.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of my family worked at Cheney University, they graduated from Cheney University and so forth. And when I was younger, I went to a STEM camp.
Mm-hmm.
And at that STEM camp, I saw a civil engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I was, early or late middle school, and I wanted to be an engineer at that point.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I got to college, I didn't have a mentor to back me up to say, hey, this is what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
My mom, she was like, look, computers are the way of the world. You
Mm-hmm.
should do computers. You should do
Mm-hmm.
computers.
Mm-hmm.
So my influence was my mom kind of pushed me to where realistically where she wanted to be. She
Mm-hmm.
wanted to learn computers, right? Now, when you bring that back and you look at the college, atmosphere now,
Mm-hmm.
some people, most African Americans are just now were able to go to college
Mm-hmm.
easier, but um, when we get in the college, like the environment, we're not set up for success.
Mm-hmm. Just
Because
because of like the background of the high school background and the family background.
of the family background, right? Now, when like the African students that I have now, like you can see their development, you can see their growth, you can see that they care.
Mm-hmm.
Even coming from a like my colleagues on the professor side, most of the professors at my university are from other countries.
Mm-hmm.
So even the process of getting into school,
Mm-hmm.
and like you have to have a job so you can file for FAFSA, so you can or you just don't qualify,
Mm-hmm.
versus African Americans, you can file for FAFSA, but if your parents make too much money, you can't, so there's
Mm-hmm.
just a different dichotomy that comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And I say all that to say, and kind of a long-winded response, but when we go into the like corporate America after going through college, we kind of do it as, okay, check this off, okay, I got my college degree, now I'm a manager, now I should be a manager, now I shouldn't be entry level.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, companies, they want to they want you to have a college degree plus 10 years of experience to get into
Yeah.
management now.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's that balance, and that's the transition, right, where you see
Yeah.
a lot of these larger companies, they are, one, not requiring a college degree
Mm-hmm.
to get in,
Mm-hmm.
but they're partnering with universities.
To educate their workers. That makes a lot of sense, and it's really smart. I was actually going to talk about how, like, a college education is not really like required for everyone. Like if you're on a path, I know only a small percentage of people are going to fit in this, but if you're on a path to like in like music or in sports or in something, and you are able to make like hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions by the time you're like 17, thank God for that, and definitely do that. I think if people have the opportunity to do that, it's a way to set themselves up really well early on.
Right.
And even if that, whatever that career is, doesn't work out in the long run, I don't know, you break a leg, literally or figuratively, you still have that you've built already to like put on your resume, to rely on the financial whatever leverage that has given you. So it's not an automatic. Depends on what's going on in your life at that age. If there's something that's going on in your life that's more promising than college, that's more lucrative than college, then you should just do it.
Right.
And then like do that for a few years. And like I said, if you break a leg, you still have the leverage that you gain from doing whatever the other thing is.
Right.
So what I like to see more of in Black American community in the US is like when we have people who are like really good at sports and really financially successful and really financially successful in the music industry and really financially successful in the film industry, I want to see more people in their, like, I don't like when they interview them and then they talk about what they're actually, let's don't talk about Black American families, just actually in general. This actually applies in general. I want to see more people, people in their family, go into areas other than what they do. So I want other people in your family to not also be trying to be singers too,
Like
and to not
following
all
the
trying
kind
to
of
be, it
trend.
makes such a difference. I want people in your family to go to become doctors, to become lawyers, to become other things that gives your whole family leverage in sort of multiple ways,
Well,
because
so
people are really manipulative. Otherwise, you're going to have somebody who's as powerful as like, Whitney Houston, and they're right in the realm of they are. And they're going to be saying, oh, the doctors were like so hard on me and they were so discriminatory. It's like, why? Can't your brother or your daughter or your uncle or your sister get them on the phone who's in that field and check them? Like when my kid was in the hospital, my sister, who's a doctor, was on the phone with, I didn't talk to the doctor.
mhm,
My sister would talk to the doctor the whole time.
mhm,
And then my sister would talk to me and be like, here, she was pretty much my agent the whole time.
mhm,
I didn't have to, because it helps a lot, because the world is, I don't know, maybe I'm feeling this because I'm thinking of like stories that are more recent, but I think that like in general, when people have a certain amount of power in some kind of way, they're subject, they're more, uh, it's tempting for people to want to control and manipulate them
mhm,
for
mhm.
their own gain. It just is.
Right.
And so they need to have people around them with some leverage, and not just people who are friends, that's it, but people actually literally within your family.
Mhm,
Because it's easy to think the family is neat and complicit. Like, oh, look at I don't know, Bobby Brown, whoever's around them, they let them fall. Look at who's around this other singer, Miss Spears. They let them fall, whatever. But really, it's their, I mean, I don't know that much about that story, actually, the second one. Let's just, let's stick with the whole Whitney story, right? So it's easy to start blaming the people around them, but really it's because the people around them, it's easy to manipulate and bulldoze them too. And
mhm,
when people don't know a lot about something, they feel intimidated too, so they cave in too. So then the whole family or whatever falls under the spell, whatever it is, whatever, more easily. But if those people had things about them that had more leverage, where they could be like, yeah, my sister or whatever is a singer, but then that helps. Like, so that's what I see there. That's something that actually has been on my mind for a little bit too. How like, so something that we have is that when we have people who are successful in certain arenas, there's no diversification of career within the family. There has to be. Otherwise, whatever you guys have doesn't have that much leverage. And because whenever you have to do anything outside of that, you still have to go to somebody that you have to trust, that has your best interests at heart. And it may be 50-50. They may kind of sort of have your best interest at heart. They may kind of be totally wanting to manipulate you for their own gain, because it's human nature, and it's not all just like, it's not all just, it's some, not necessarily because of this, it's just like people are just prone to behave that way sometimes. So that's what I'd like to see more of. I'd like to see more of these families have more people with diverse careers in their family. That way, when push comes to shove, people can stand up for them or have a say in it. Be like, I understand that sort of that industry, or I understand that, legal know-how. I understand that medical know-how, and speak up for them. It's not good when they have to rely on outside people only who can be bribed, who can be, you know what I mean? Who don't have, yeah. And then, so that's my 2 second soapbox on
Well,
that issue.
it speaks to community,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
So, um, one, your family community
Mhm,
and what your exposure is,
mhm,
your outside community and what your exposure is. And then we can even take that to your college community. When you look at college levels in different schools, it's a community environment.
mhm,
And there's a correlation to the jobs, right? So if you go to a state school, you're probably going to be or end up somewhere in that tier 2 management level,
mhm,
right? You'll be a senior director, maybe not a VP, right?
mhm,
Within reason.
mhm,
You go to a Ivy League, you're senior management business owner, right? But this is the people you're going to school with, right? This is the community you're around, the network connection, the way you know how to socialize. That all plays a part into corporate America. Um, Even down to the fact that your sister is a doctor, right? That speaks to something more to your family, because your family had to be able to support someone going to school for 15 years after high school,
So, okay, all
depending
right. You
on
got
what,
me on that one. My
you see
sister
what I'm
points
saying?
that out. She says a lot of this stuff about becoming doctor's lawyer is really for rich people, like because she thinks about that when she was in Boston doing her she between college and med school, she spent 3 years in Boston working at a cancer hospital
Mhm.
in Massachusetts. And of course, who was paying for her apartment? My parents.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was $1,000 a month.
That's generational wealth. That's what, when we talk about generational wealth, that's the
And
importance of it.
and there's a lot of people like that who can't afford to angle themselves for the best medical school by doing like a research at a cancer hospital at the whatever, and have their parents pay $1,000 a month for them
Mhm.
to to live there, and also pay for their food or whatever, because I think the internship paid a small stipend, but it wasn't really much.
Mhm.
So I think yeah,
Mhm.
so a lot of times it ends up becoming a situation where these journeys towards success are so long
Right.
that only people whose families are financially pretty comfortable can afford to put up with it,
Mhm.
because only someone who can turn to mom and be like, oh, so it's like this is going to be 2000, and mom say okay, or dad say okay, only
Or
those people can do it.
somebody that has the initiative,
Okay,
right? Because there's a whole bunch of free money out there.
that's
There
true
is
too. There's free
scholarship
money
money,
out
there
there.
is free money out there. You just have to have the know-how
Mhm.
and the pure intent, just an intention to want to
Yeah,
search for it,
yeah,
because it's there,
it's
you
there.
know.
Yeah.
But it just becomes a and again, going back to your family values, right? Like, if your parents are pushing you into just college and saying go to college because you have to, but not really saying go to college so you can, you've always wanted to be, an engineer. Let me hone this skill as an engineer and support you on that journey, keep you pushing forward, because look, when things get tough, especially when finances and, the picture of life, we give up, right? Like, I would love to be a lawyer, right? But if I were to go through that 2 year process, and I'm just speaking like I'm not, that's not realistic, but
Okay.
if I would go through that process, what am I risking on the other side, right? Like, and even if you can become these things, but it's not guaranteed that you're going to get a top paying job.
Oh,
Like, I
it's
know
not
a
at
lot
all,
of
not at all,
lawyers
not at
that,
all.
yeah, I know a lot of lawyers that are struggling,
Yeah.
making less than 60K,
Mhm.
and it's like, and
There,
to say
there's a
making
huge
less than
range of
60K.
there's some jobs that are more guaranteed success, like medical school and doctors tend to all make six figures, generally, like flat out. Where I
Mhm.
feel like with attorneys, it ranges more from like 50 to like 7 figures. So there's a
Depending on what you
huge,
do. Mhm. If you go
so
government,
there are lawyers that are millionaires, and there are lawyers that are just like earning 25 bucks an hour. It's a huge range. A lot of it can depend on how well they've leveraged their careers, like whether you became a mom and then spent a lot of years raising that, and you were kind of in and out of doing this part-time, doing that. Well, that's not really going to help you out. It's not going to help you, climb up your ladder very, very efficiently. But
right.
then sometimes people like that can do well independently if they start a business
Mhm.
that's like, anchored to something that has a lot of potential. So
Right.
even though it's like, they were splitting time between raising kids and doing this and doing that, if they have something, they can, grow what that is. But yeah, but yeah, there's a lot more, a huge, just a big ocean of difference in how much when people end up making certain professions, depending on how they've invested their, what's had a chance, how things have had a chance to play out. But I would say generally it kind of seems like a college education is worth it in the long term, because it's one of those things where like it may not seem worth it at the beginning, because it doesn't, because like there's some people who look at it from this perspective. I graduated with a degree in accounting or English or whatever. I'm not automatically going to make that much money. And somebody else who's an apprentice and who's been at something for a while, since they were 18 years old, may be at a higher income gap by the time you graduate than whatever, you know what I'm saying. By the
Mhm.
time you graduate for 4 years school, they may be at a higher level already because they've been an apprentice for this long or whatever at this particular area. But I feel like in the long run, it's worth it because there's a certain amount of respect that comes with it. Respect that you end up having for yourself,
Right.
and respect that you're gonna have, that your resume is going to have in certain scenarios, not in all scenarios. And I definitely know people who are incredibly successful and who have hired me to help them out as an attorney who didn't have college degrees themselves. So it's really funny to be like the co-educated one and be helping this guy who owns like, a fleet of RVs or fleet of this, and actually never went to college and just was like, oh, so I learned from my uncle. He showed me everything he knows. He said, we're going to do this, 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 and that. Yep, there are people like that out there who finished high school, somebody in their family or somebody who knew their mother or their daddy had a big, huge business, and then they just followed whatever that person did. And then they become even bigger than that person. In other words, they apprenticed under somebody, and then they voila, and then they're hiring lawyers, and they tell me like, oh, actually, I never went to college, and they're like, oh, but they say stuff to me like, oh, I'm dumb about this. Like, oh no, you're not dumb at all. You're really smart. You have like $500,000 or whatever. Do you want it? Do you know how much I have? Not that.
Well, it's that,
you've nailed it. You've narrowed in on something that that you had somebody to turn you into, and you grew something really, really, really huge. So in that kind of scenario, someone like that doesn't need a college degree on their resume to get respect. Right. Because they have like, $1 million business, multi-business to get respect from. But a lot of times it does help, is all I'm saying. Yeah. A lot of times it does help, and a lot of times it is worth it.
Well, it's two things that come to mind. One, C students hire A students to complete the work. Second, it's not what you know or who you know, but who knows you, right? So the person that knows you is going to perform or give you information. The person that you're going to ask them for information, but you might not get it, the exact information. They're going to give you what you ask for, not what you need to know, right? And then even, when you think about those C students, the C students, what did they do best? They communicated with others.
They were playing.
They were playing around. They had friends. They had fun. They had fun, right? But having fun, you're networking.
It's bigger.
Yep. So, it's when you put all that together, and even, I'll tell you the biggest difference now and the biggest challenge, right? Like I'm a business management professor, on two different sides. One is traditional students, 18, 19, 20 years old. I'm teaching them principles of management at 19 or 20. Most of my students at a traditional level have never had a job, or haven't had a corporate based job. Maybe they worked in, a restaurant, or, something like a car tenant or something like that, right? Cashier.
That's industry experience. That's something.
But they can't relate that to management in a true, like, managing people.
I know what you mean.
You think about, they relate it to what I would do if I was a person, but it's more internal. Like they think, well, I pay my people more money and that's going to fix all my problems, but it's really going to give you more problems because you don't got enough money coming in to keep that up, right?
Yeah.
Now the other side of the cohorts that I teach is the adult degree program. Now my adult degree program are college students that they've been in corporate America. They're about, I'd say on average, mid 30s, early 40s. As young, probably my youngest was 25, 26, 27, oldest being early 60s. They've worked in corporate America, but they feel that they've been passed up for opportunities because they don't have their college degree. Now, the reality is most of them, the ones that don't have, like you have about 10% of the students that they've been told by their company, you can't go to that next level until you get this degree. So they come into this adult degree program knowing they're going to have a job as soon as they graduate. So, they do enough to pass, but it's because they're already seated.
Yeah.
Then you have those that feel like they've been passed up on opportunities. They worked at companies for 15 years and never interviewed or never accepted as a manager. And, it's their analysis is everyone that gets this job has a college degree. I don't. So they come back to school. Well, when I'm talking to them or instructing them in this business management or just management environment, they understand, right? Like they know, they can relate to, oh, I had a manager do that to me before, and this is how I felt. And oh, now I get what they were trying to do or why they did that. So you have one side of the spectrum, adult degree, they get it. They get their college degrees, and like now they're the people that corporate America is looking for. They have 10 years experience in various industries, and now they have a college degree compared to the traditional student that they have no experience. Corporate America knows that as soon as you come in, you're going to be here for 2 years and then you're going to move on to the next thing. So it costs me more money to hire a traditional student than it does for me to hire adult degree, because the traditional student's going to be here for a year. They're just trying it out, figuring themselves out and figuring where they want to go.
They're going to be there for a little bit and they're going to change their mind. Whereas the one that's been there all along, that's just using the degree to enhance to enhance the opportunity within the company, is a safer bet, because they're more set into the place in the first place. And so they're more likely to just use the degree to enhance that position and stay with it, because that's their plan. That's their base all along.
Right.
That makes sense.
Right. Now, what my advice would be for any, high school student thinking about college, go into corporate America first. If I could go back, and now when I graduated college, I was a teller for 6 months, went and got into IT. I graduated with a business management information systems degree. But I got hired as a teller in a credit union. And then after 6 months, I was able to apply for IT. That's what got me into IT, right? But that's
so basically you're saying they should go into the work for some people, not everybody, but for some people, they should go into the workforce and sit there and just keep doing that.
If you don't know what you want to do, or if you don't know what you're passionate about, like if you don't, like if you're like, like if you don't want to, if you don't know what you want your career to be or where you want to go in the next 10 years, work, get some money, enjoy life, do self-study. You don't have to, I'd say you don't have to go to college the traditional way. You could go to college and just take 2 to 3 courses a year and collectively get, but it becomes a personal development path more than an education, right? Like, you got people going to college for business communications. Most African Americans are going to school for business communications. What skill set is that?
It's very general. It's kind of like one of those things that when you hear it, it sounds good. Business communication sounds good, sounds like something's going to help you, but really kind of like it lacks definition as to what the curriculum is. It's sort of like a catch-all phrase, business communication.
Long-term, right? Long-term.
Good marketing skill. I'm going to make a major and I'm going to need, just kidding. So, I mean, I see what you're saying. And, I've worked summers and I worked at sort of in corporate center, just helping with payroll and doing stuff like that. Just being in like companies like Avnet, I don't even remember, they were all like temporary, whatever. So I'm trying to repicture things. Say, for example, I work for a company like Avnet. Instead of working there for like, during term period when I was my late teens or something, let's say I just sat there and I just absorbed that corporate environment. And then I just took college in little by little by little more. I mean, I think it's not for everybody to do things that way.
Yeah, no. Now, I wouldn't have made it.
I'm like, I guess, but
I wouldn't have made, I don't know if I would have made it, to be truthful, because I was party face, 18 years old, I was having a good time, enjoying life. So what I have,
and you're also very philosophical. I remember wanting to be around, like, I didn't want to be in a day-to-day, like, here's your stapler, here's the process, and you do this and blah, blah, blah. And what's the gossip going over there? And like, oh my God, what's going on in the break room? I can't believe this drama and blah, 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 blah. I didn't want to be in that world like every day. I wanted to be like around intellectual, smart people and talk about where the world was going and what's going on. And I ate up that shit. I don't know what's wrong with me. But that's the stuff that I wanted to be in and
Right.
into. And Cornell fed me that, like the university I went to
Yeah.
fed me
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Like, we'd be in the basement of our dorm late at night, contemplating, like, can you beat them and
Yep.
join them? No, we would
That's
just say stuff
community.
like that. We're like, just like, all these like presumptive heroic like stories we thought we were in.
Right. Now
All
that's
this
community though.
rubbish. But it
That's
was
community.
fun.
Yeah, that's community. That's
But
community.
it was
You see
fun.
what I'm saying? So like
Oh
if you
my
would
God.
have taken that environment, right, you couldn't have gone to your local state school and had that same experience.
No,
Like
everybody,
Cornell was a
everybody in my
different
college was
school.
like a gene. We had perfect SAT scorers and whatever. But you know
Yeah.
what? All of them a lot of them had rich parents who gave them tutors.
And that's another thing, right? So when you look at the difference between cultural and society, right?
Mhm.
Most, and this is changing, but it's still the same. Most African American families, we trust the school system, or we expect that the school system
We'll do
will
everything they gotta
educate
do.
our
We'll do
kids.
everything that's needed.
Yeah, and it's not the school life, it's how you reinforce it at home on all
Mhm.
stages, and that's the difference. Being able to buy a tutor or to afford a tutor, like I know, Indian family friend,
Mhm.
um, like their parents literally would teach them like through all of their like from early education on to
Their
college.
parents would really dig into their education a lot.
They were reading alongside of them, like,
Mm.
literally to pick up the text, read, so that they could teach and reinforce and understand.
Mhm.
See, but it was bigger than just, getting, their son or daughter through school. It was,
Mhm.
okay, once you get through this, this is how you're going to add value to the family.
Yeah.
Once you do this, then you're going to go here. Like usually I think the oldest kid pays for the next kid, and then and then so the parents might pay for the oldest kid, college, or college education, and
Mhm.
then once that oldest kid graduates, they then pay for the younger siblings college
Yeah.
graduation, and it's passed down. But if you
Yeah.
don't have that, then it's you're kind of walking around aimlessly, and you're doing what you think should be done, but we waste a lot of money, kind of doing what we think we should be, what we think we should do. We waste a lot of
Mhm.
money,
Mhm.
and we don't really listen to who's been there before,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So it just becomes like a challenge. And I think it was Cornell, was it? I think it was Cornell. The African American students schooled, or excuse me, the African American students sued the university
Mhm.
because what they were saying was that the African students were being given African American students scholarship funds.
Mhm.
So now,
Yeah.
and I see that here, right, at my university.
Mhm.
They're bringing in more African students,
Mhm.
and the African students have a higher success rate,
Mhm.
but we're all Black,
Yeah.
you see. But now, there's two separate classes, but to, America, African or African American, it's all the same,
Mhm.
but they're two different pots.
I can definitely see how you guys see that as unfair, because you guys feel like the purpose of these diversity scholarships are to enhance opportunity for you guys that they took away, because they made rules about, like, oh, you can't go to school, or you're not allowed to learn how to read, or you have to go to a separate school. Oh, well, you have to, just to make all sorts of ridiculous, obviously right. And the purpose of this diversity stuff for African American is to compensate for that. So
Right.
when they give it to like Black, people of also of Black ethnicity that are more like straight out of the continent or whatever,
Right. Right.
it
Right.
seems almost unfair. Although these guys have challenges a lot of times too. These
Yeah.
guys are 50-50. Some of
Mhm.
these people coming from what African countries are coming because they have the means. They're like a little bit rich and can move. But then some of them are refugees or whatever. So not all of them are.
Yeah. 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 And even and see, that's the thing, right? So
But
like,
even then, they don't really owe them the responsibility that they owe to the people that they really made the rules for. So you have to kind of like, because in law, what we do is kind of like, what was contemplated when Congress came up with this law
Yeah.
and came up with this rule. So
I
when they came
agree.
up with it, what was contemplated is who was it contemplated to benefit? It
Mhm.
certainly wasn't contemplated to benefit like, upper class people from Africa who decide to move, or refugees from Africa who decide to move. It certainly wasn't contemplated to be, although they have a lot of those, right?
Right.
It was contemplated to benefit more like descendants of the slave era
Mhm.
Blacks and who came up through, yeah. So
Right.
it was meant to benefit descendants of that era.
Right.
And so if they don't give it to them, it almost seems retarded. It
Mhm.
seems
Mhm.
like they're kind of, but I can see why they do what they do there too, because it's convenient.
Well,
It's just like, it's
you
like,
can't be
whoa, we
you
have
can't
to
be mad.
try to find this specific person, this specific category of person, or just give it to the person that's there.
Right.
It's so
Right.
much
Right.
easier to just be like, oh, you're like,
You applied. You fit the
Latifa,
needs.
blah, blah, blah from Sierra Leone. There you go, you get it.
Mhm.
Or you're whatever, whatever from, yeah,
Mhm.
there you go. Like it
Yep.
satisfies the requirement to give it to
Mhm.
someone like, and it's quick. And having to and also those guys are kind of like culturally obsessed with education
Right.
because,
Right. Right. Right.
because that's what not all the time because they have like English as a second language problems, but oftentimes because I tend to come across a lot of Nigerians who come here who are obviously like really, really into, you know, really dig into their education and stuff like that. So obviously so they're really enthusiastic about all that and they don't have the sort of cultural beat up on your brain where you're being made to feel as if being smart isn't for you and
Mhm.
being successful isn't for you and being focused on education isn't for you, which um, American descendants of the slave era have that being made to feel as if pursuing certain goals isn't for them or doesn't need to be for them or isn't their style or doesn't need to be. So the ones who come straight out of from like Africa or whatever don't have that mindset. They don't think that trying to be smart or whatever isn't for them, so they go for it more. And so
Mhm.
that enthusiasm makes it easier for the person who's trying to like do the scholarship thing, be like, oh yeah, you're all pumped up about it. Let's just give it
Yeah.
to you, as
Yeah.
opposed to trying to reach out for the person who you have to work on you just have to work on their psyche about the whole thing first and then give it to them. And people are
Mhm.
lazy. And that's
Mhm.
not always the case, but that can be the case a lot of times. So then people are like, yeah, so they'll just go for the easy one. They'll hand it to the one who seems already prepped up for them to be like, so I think that it's important then maybe for you guys to call them out on that a little bit more and saying like, the way these things are designed is like, what did Congress have in mind when they came up with the decision to do this? Who did they really have in mind to benefit? Can we put a little more emphasis on that? Can we
Right.
put a little more emphasis on having it benefit the people it's really intended to, instead of just trying to throw it on
But,
whoever fits the bill?
well, that's where it comes back to community, right? Because, somebody had to come up with this scholarship or this funding, and then they had to get that information out. Now, if one student versus the other finds it and they apply for it, that's totally fine and okay. And that's again where the challenge is with the African American, like the African American plight, is that, do we have that? I wouldn't say that initiative. Do we have the awareness, right? Like you're almost kind of brought up in a society and you're told the way it is. And then once we kind of we're made more so to survive in a society that doesn't support you. So we're very independent at very young ages, most likely, right? And to survive, to work, to pay bills. College education is great, but you got to pay your bills first, right? Like, yeah, you could be a lawyer. Look, I wanted to be a doctor, but you got to pay your bills first. You know what I mean? Like, it just becomes a different versus now, international students, you're coming from something totally different where, the education level is it's a privilege, not not a guarantee. So even to go to higher education, the competition for international schools is a little bit more intense, I think, than it is here. Until you get to the, top schools, the Ivy League schools and so forth. But again, that's awareness. Like if you have international students that are like, you have Asian students that come from like, Asian countries. Their parents pay for them to go to American schools. They come back to these Asian countries and then they go back to American schools. So not only do they speak their language, they're speaking English, they're doing work in English, and then they're, able to connect in an English society or American society to get jobs, and you get jobs and you bring your family over versus African Americans, we get jobs for our own benefit, right? And then, the more successful we get, the more we look around and there's no one around that looks like us.
Oh,
And,
dude, that happens to me. That's
right. Well, this is the challenge though, right? This is the challenge about that,
it's
right? So,
depressing. It
well,
makes you, it has an odd tendency
mhm,
to, it actually has a disincentive to kind of
mhm.
make people not even want to succeed. Because
Well,
if, well, I mean, it doesn't have that, like, or they find other, I think that's actually true because like, if I'm thinking about, because it's like, it's human nature to want to fit in.
mhm,
So in my high school, for example, like, even though I was one of the few kids who was really into taking honors classes and trying to be this and that, there was tons of Black kids around me. It's like my school was like 20% Black and like, like 30% Latino and
question,
Asian or whatever,
were
and
you
like
into
50%
that?
white. So, and then I went to college and then it dropped a little bit.
Well, let me ask you a question. Were you into that? Were you into education, or did your family enforce the importance of education?
Well, I was at first, it was really funny the way it all worked out, like freshman year and stuff. Like earlier on, it was kind of like, why is she so like blah, 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 blah. But they respected it later on. By like 11th and 12th grade, they're like, all right, fine. Yeah, we'll give it to you.
Mhm, 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 mhm.
Oh, yeah. Then they all wanted to be best friends.
Right,
They're like, all
right,
right,
right.
fine. At first, they were like too into this or too into, like trying to be a certain kind of person.
But was that you, or was that your family fulfilling that with you, like telling you how important it was that you paid attention, how important it was that you?
So I think that it depends. I think for a lot of like immigrant kids who are born here, it's
Mhm.
their parents.
Right.
It's their parents and like the community, the other families that they see around, other families who are friends with their parents. So for me, I was born there. I was grown like by I came here at 11 years old.
Okay. Okay.
So I was already like, so I already had like you know, a baby, like, I'm gonna rock the world mindset.
Mhm,
Like
mhm,
at
mhm.
because when I came here and I went to, the Nigerian church and whatever, we had issues with people getting pregnant at 15.
Right.
We had
Right.
issues with like, not me, obviously, but we had issues with the kids who were born here or who were raised here largely. I'm not that that has to be I'm just saying that 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 we're not immune to those things. So we had some of that, but I,
No, I laughed because I was informed that Africans, when they come to this country, that they're told or urged not to mix in with the Black community.
yeah, a lot of those kids were told that because of things like that. They were scared that they were told that because, or you're just gonna end up pregnant by 16 if you hang out with those kids because that's how they roll and they're gonna teach you how to roll like that and you're not gonna have a future. So there's a lot of that kind of like,
Cultural and community.
yeah, there's a lot, and then they push, those uh, yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, but
Now,
yeah, I
I'll
definitely
tell
heard
you, I'll
I
tell you the difference, right? Like now, I learned by sixth grade, never come home with um like good grades
hmm?
because yes, I came home my
I thought you
first
were gonna say never come up with a B, because my dad was kind of like that. My
never.
dad was like, a B was bad, and you have to come up with A's. After all, it's only seventh grade. How hard could it be? He was
My
like, that's
mom,
only seventh grade. How hard could it be? Come up with A's.
my mom played it by, basically she judged by how I did previously, so I always had to do better than what I did before. So my first time, my first semester, first whatever marking period or whatever it was at that time, I made honor roll. The second time I didn't make honor roll, my mom put me on punishment. So I made sure that I always kept a level that I could always be consistent with. So I was B and C's, never forced for A's. On top of that, my mom had this rule where, you come home, like make sure you do your work. I always came home with an empty book bag, and I did my work in study hall. Because if I came home with books, my mom was going to force me to do my work. So when I came home, hey mom, what kind of homework you got? What do you got to do? I don't got anything. I finished it all in study hall. Realistically, I'm coming to school in homeroom in the morning. I'm doing my work. Study hall or lunch, I'm doing my work. But I created my own procrastination system because that's how my family, unit, kind of, did studies. Like, how did you do? Okay, this is where you were. Good. You did this last year. Cool. But those things kind of in that self-learning, self-support, self-study, it lingers with me into college, or it lingered with me into college. I didn't really learn how to be a student until I got to my MBA.
Wow. I forget that you have that. I forget you have the MBA thing. Good. That's good.
Yep. So, but cultural background, cultural difference. So, even again, going back to this conversation here about the, importance of college education, it really depends on, your track and where you want to go, right? If you don't really know what you want to be or where you want to go later on in life, go to work, get exposure, understand what opportunities are there, understand like, truly, this is, a manager in this position, VP in this position, and then identify what you want to be and where you want to go.
That might actually be more effective. Now that I'm listening to what you're saying from a different angle, I'm thinking that may be more effective if you come from a family that really are not the best at steering you to focus on from the sort of like traditional, the sort of prescribed education, that whole angle, that whole like, go get a liberal arts degree or whatever, or business degree from this university. If you come from a family that's not really that great at steering you for that kind of stuff, it may be a lot smarter to actually just get in the workforce. Get in the workforce and then take on those things more and more at a time. That way you understand it better and you're kind of able to be your own parent. You're doing it all in an age where you're able to parent yourself through and learn it through yourself more, as opposed to, so if you're coming from an environment where they don't really set you up to approach those things to the best advantage, approach the whole like get an English degree or get a business degree thing and the most at all, just and then or engineering or whatever it is. Or do really good in high school, take like advanced placement courses and honors courses in calculus already, be in calculus by the time you're a senior in high school. I took calculus in high school. Take honors English and, test out of certain courses. I tested out of certain courses by the time I was in college. Like if you come from it and that where you're not surrounded people who are good at angling you for all that stuff, then it's better for you to just get in the workforce and get the advantage of that and then just do the college stuff. Like just take it.
And find a job that,
well, yeah, obviously just get a job that way you can pay for your life.
Find a job that's willing to pay for your college
that's true. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of companies that help you now. Find a job that'll help you with the education part. That'll kind of like, that's a good point.
And now when you're in that company, typically for them to pay for your college education, you have to write or you have to submit why this class, this course, or this degree is going to help improve you in this position or in this company. So now you have more of an intention to say, okay, well, I want to be in management, or I want to be in the legal department, or I want to be in marketing. Now you're going and you're not going in somewhere blind. You can really apply what you're learning right there at your job.
And it really gives you less anxiety about the education. Like in a law school or in college or whatever, whenever people got their offers as far as like what they were going to be doing next, they were almost always the most peaceful, the most like chill students, because they were all set up. They were looking at like, six figures. They already knew which six-figure job they were going into. And of course, in college, they already knew which, at that time, 40, 50, 60K job they were going into. They already knew which ones. So the ones that got their offers by the beginning of senior year were the best. They were the most like, I just have to preserve the status quo and do decent. I just have to, you know what I mean? They were totally like that. No, they had no, like, whatever about anything. They didn't
Yeah.
need it.
And I guarantee you that culturally, most of those students were international or Caucasian.
They were
But,
white a lot, yeah.
but they knew, but they
It's like,
knew,
yes, most of those kids were
but,
white.
but they knew what to do next. So now if I'm a first time, like I'm a first generation college graduate, right? So like my mom has her associate's degree.
My
Um,
friend Felian had a job at Procter and Gamble. My friend who was African American had a job at Procter and Gamble lined up. Well, they weren't
well,
all
no, no,
white, but
no.
mostly you're right.
Well,
You're
no,
right for the most part.
well, hear me out, hear me out. So like I'm a first time college graduate, right? So like my parents couldn't tell me what to do as
Mhm,
far as like how to apply for jobs, how to
mhm,
apply for scholarships.
mhm,
Again, they expected the school to tell me that stuff or to put me through that stuff, but ultimately it was my decision,
mhm,
right? So now when you get into college, and the same thing. So I tell my students now, like make sure, you're doing internships, make
mhm,
sure, you're applying for jobs, like understand where you want to be and where you want to go and like the company environments that you like before you get into these companies.
mhm,
I graduated and I didn't have a job.
mhm.
I didn't know how to search for jobs. Like,
What? Ask your friends, look on the internet, ask your professors,
again, community, right? Like
professors,
community,
friends, internet.
if your friends are doing that, right? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like that sounds great. It's
yeah.
you're right. It's 100% common sense.
Mhm.
But at 18, 19, 20 years old, you're thinking party, you're not thinking, you know, oh, I need to make 80,000.
Mhm.
You're just like, look, I just want a job. Like, I don't
Just
even
want to
know what I want to
survive.
do in
Yeah.
corporate America. I want to survive. I want to enjoy life. Like, I've been in school for all this time. Like, you think corporate America is a break from school. And that's not the case. All right. Like,
No.
if you want to be stagnant and where you are,
Mhm,
yes, cool.
mhm,
Live it out. But if you want to excel and climb that ladder, you're going to have to learn something.
mhm,
You're going to have to teach yourself something. And ironically, I'd say that most people, no matter the more financially successful you are,
mhm,
you can sit here and say that you would love to travel and you would retire and sit on the beach every day. At some point, that becomes boring.
mhm,
And I find that most people that are, again, financially successful, um, what they do with their free time is they educate themselves more.
mhm,
They read more books.
mhm,
They travel. They go to different cultures. They have different experiences in life. Like those are the things that get you ahead,
mhm.
right? Not the I went to college. It's the community, how you networked, where you want, what your experiences are, and how you continue to develop
Mhm,
yourself.
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Connections help too. A lot of people benefit from, you know, family connections all the time, especially during periods of recession and stuff like that.
Mhm. And see now, and so I realized and kind of what put me on the trajectory of where I am right now.
Mhm,
Um, I was 25, let's say
mhm,
25, 26, and I was a mentor at my church. So I
mhm,
was mentoring, boys between the ages of like 7 to like 13, 14 years old.
mhm,
And and I think I shared this story last time, but there was within the high school that I was close to, the athletic director at the school,
mhm,
and the like, let's say gym coach or like one of the basketball coaches or whatever, they were on the um, school cell phones provided to them. And they said for the Black students, they were like, it doesn't even matter what their last name is. Let's call them, let's call them all nigger.
mhm.
And it was like, let's call them
Wait, what? I'm sorry, I missed what you said. Let's
yeah.
rewind.
It said they were texting on the cell phones, the school cell phones to
Okay, okay,
each
let's
other.
rewind again. So which school?
This is Coatesville,
Oh, what's the name?
Coatesville
Name,
High School,
name?
Coatesville High School,
Coachville High School, where?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. What
Yeah.
city in
So
Pennsylvania?
this is Coatesville.
Coachville is the city.
Yeah, it's called Coatesville,
Coat, like a coat you wear, or coach? A
Coat,
coat you wear.
Coat, Coat.
Coatesville,
Yes,
Pennsylvania. Go
yes,
ahead.
yes. You can, look, Google
I
it.
can look
You
it up.
can,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
you can
What
find it.
happened?
But so the director of athletic director and let's say the basketball coach or gym teacher or whatever,
They
they
were
were
texting back
texting
and
each
forth.
other back and forth on the or on the school's phones,
Mhm.
and they were saying we shouldn't even call the students by their last name. Let's just call them, Shaniqua Nigger and Bobby Nigger, like all the like. So they're having a joke on this like this way. Now imagine, as a student, most of the athletes are
Well, how
African
did you
American.
find out about this?
It
Clearly,
was
if they were
in
doing
the
shit like stuff
paper.
like that, they didn't want you to
It was
know,
in the
huh?
paper. It was
It
in
was
the
in the
paper. I
newspaper.
said, research it. You can Google this. It's in the
Oh,
paper.
wow.
Yes. So, but that was a turning point for me because I realized that, at that point in time, I didn't know like doctors and lawyers. Like all the doctors and lawyers that I knew, they were in school, but I couldn't go back and say like, I knew, like anybody that's in a higher profession, right? So, imagine this, you're high school students and, like literally you're being looked at as, less than by the people that are supposed to have your back, right? So,
It was hard for me in high school too, because um, my sister had an easier time because she followed me. She's a year and a half younger than me. So, the MD.
mhm,
And by the time they got to her, they were used to the idea that people from this family, which is my family, were not going to be like lowballed and put in a box. But they were used to treating Black students a certain way and thinking of them a certain way and trying to push them as, and you're right. And it's almost like not getting support from the very few people who are required to give it to you. So I can definitely sympathize with that kind of experience. It didn't bother me though, because, well, I assume in Pennsylvania you're saying that it was pretty bad, but um, God, I'm starting to forget. I'm so old now; it doesn't even matter.
yeah,
I'm
but you
so
come
old
from
now.
a
I'm like, oh
strong,
yeah, in high school
you
I
come
went through
from a
that too.
strong, you come from a strong family background. So that wasn't going to change you. That
Yeah.
wasn't going
Also,
to,
like I said, coming here when I was 11 made it different because like when I was 14 years old and these white people were trying to tell me like, oh, so this is the box where we think that like makes sense for like people like you and whatever. And my brain at that age, at such a young age, was like, I'm sorry, I just hallucinated. You can't define me. It's like nonsensical.
mhm,
Because
mhm, mhm,
like my
that's the way
like
you
my
knew.
brain just flipped it, even at a young age, just flipped it and said, and everything you know about being Black is something you like, enslave and you bring over here and you did this for and you do that for. And and I don't come from that dynamic and I can't be compromised into that. So I can't be whatever the fuck it is you want. It is impossible.
Mhm.
So like, yeah, so at that age, it was like, so when I felt that nudge, it's like, it was almost like, they're like, oh, something like, like some idea of some whatever. And it was like, it was like yanking my brain out. Um, yeah, so I wasn't even hurt or disturbed. My brain just didn't take it
Didn't
because
take
my
it.
brain was like, you
That
can't
wasn't your
define me.
identification.
It was almost a sense of like there's more to me than exists in the way you've decided to categorize a Black person. And
Now
so
tell
I'm
me,
not interested. So whatever the fuck that is, it doesn't interest me. I don't
right.
need to know.
Now tell me about your like community, I guess, of close family. Are you the first lawyer and your sister first MD? Or do you guys have some like close family friends around here that,
So my grandfather was actually one of the first doctors trained, like, when the country got independence. Actually, before they did, they were like, I don't, yeah, like, he was trained abroad. So he was the first person in our family that immigrated. So he got his medical degree from Ireland, right?
mhm,
And then he took my grandma with him. And so and then they had my mom in Nigeria before they left. So my
right,
mom was raised by extended family because her parents had to go be whatever. And so they left her there and they
right,
moved abroad. And then they had two other kids abroad. And so they have two other kids abroad that they ended up having. My aunt, so my mom comes from a family of three girls, and my dad comes from a family of three boys. So,
okay.
my mom's immediate younger sister is an attorney. She's a solicitor in the UK. So that's her career. And then the
So now
next,
you got to understand your background, where you were coming from
mhm.
before you even got here.
Mhm.
You already knew what you could be because of what your direct family is
Mhm.
on both sides.
Mhm.
The difference being here is that, like, most of our families, especially like like, well, our generation, like my generation, like most of our families were blue collar workers.
Mhm.
So they didn't go to work in, tie, suit, buttoned up, none of that. Like, they literally went in steel mills. Like, my uncle worked at a steel mill, retired at a steel mill. If you Google Coatesville has one of the largest producing steel mills, or it used to be owned by ArcelorMittal. Now it's owned by Cleveland Steel, I believe. But
I
either
think
way,
one of the things that's tough about that sort of thing is that you don't have people around you to give you inroads in how to carve a path that's different from that. And also when other people around you, the non-Black people, let's just say the white people,
yeah,
for example, realize that even when they pretend that they want to help, and maybe they kind of do, they're human beings and they are susceptible to sort of taking advantage of the disadvantaged position that you're coming from
mhm, mhm,
and not
mhm,
being
mhm.
as helpful as they're saying that they're gonna be.
Right,
You see what I
right,
mean?
right, right, right,
So
right,
then,
right.
so then it becomes a situation where the community has to learn it itself, and it can't rely on the goodness of the people who see the disadvantaged position you're in and will tend to take advantage of that sometimes just because they can.
Right. Well, you
Just
don't know. You're unconscious, right? It's an unconscious bias,
yeah,
right? Like,
so
you
forget
don't.
unconscious bias.
Yeah.
They're human. Humans are parasites. They will take advantage of the idea that they have an advantage over you in that situation.
Well, but
So they will.
sometimes you don't know.
I mean,
It's
not
not even,
all the time, not always, but they can,
I
And
guess
so it's like,
why I say it's unconscious though is because, like, in Austin, Austin's 70% Caucasian. There's
mhm,
450,000 Caucasians. There are 350,000 Latinos.
mhm,
There are 12,000 African Americans,
mhm,
and there are about 5 to 7,000 Asians.
mhm,
The Asians, for the most part, 48% of the Asians do not speak English as a first language.
mhm,
When we look at unemployment, Caucasians, 470,000, are experiencing less than 4% unemployment. Latinos in Texas, now this is because it's Texas, 350,000, they're experiencing less than 4% unemployment. Asians,
mhm,
7,000, they're experiencing, and 48% of them don't speak English as a first language.
mhm,
Their unemployment is less than 2%.
mhm,
African Americans, 12,000 in Texas, in Austin, excuse me, 12,000 in Austin. Unemployment, 20%. There are, like, if you do the numbers, it's almost the same amount of unemployed African Americans at 12,000 as it is as Caucasians at 450,000. So when I say that there's unconscious bias, like, if you're looking to hire more African Americans in whatever company and it's based in Austin, well, realistically, I can say, hey, I've been looking, but there's only 12,000. And of that 12,000, 5 to 10% have a college degree, less than 5% have a higher degree. So I may want to hire somebody that's African American, but depending on where I'm from or where my location are, the numbers don't justify it. So now I'm looking for somebody to fit, not the right candidate, but it's because the right candidate's not there. Like, it's an unconscious thing where, it's the Indeed stated that 63% of all hires came from, like, internal referral.
mhm,
So if most of the people
mhm.
that are educated are Caucasian, who are you going to refer to come in to work for your company?
Yeah.
Unconscious. And that's me. Like, I can't even go, like, I could, like, because of the position that I am, being that I'm the president of the National Black MBA Association here, I know a lot of educated Black people, right? But if I wasn't in that position and somebody were to say, hey, I'm looking for more African Americans, can you help me out?
You
I
wouldn't be
wouldn't know
able to
where to
give them
go.
anybody, yeah.
Yeah, and if it's my name on the line, am I really going to give my close network if my name's on the line?
Mhm. Yeah, you're not gonna want to recommend somebody random.
just because they're, who they are. You know what I mean? And you know where
Yeah.
they come from.
Mhm.
There's just certain, so when you look at this on the corporate basis, and again, why I say it's unconscious bias is because who looks at that? Who thinks about 470,000 Caucasians compared to 12,000 African Americans? And then you wonder why you can't find African Americans to work in
I
your
thought Austin was more black than that. I guess I was thinking of Dallas and Houston.
Dallas and Houston, yes, not
I thought
Austin, not Austin.
Austin is not as black as Dallas and Houston. All right, I'll keep that in mind.
Nowhere near. So what happens is the African Americans come to Austin.
Mhm.
They realize that there's no,
They realize there's nothing there. And they're like, so I'm going to try Dallas or Houston.
well, socially, you want social life. Professionally, you want social life. Like you
I
go
can
to, you're
socialize
in
with white
Atlanta,
people, no problem. I
but
just
you're in
like having
Atlanta.
other black people in the world around me because it makes me feel like, I don't know, normal.
Yeah. You go to high school, you sit around the people that look like you.
Mm.
You
Well,
know,
not always, but yeah, I know what you mean.
you do. At some point, if it wasn't high school, at college, because what happens is you realize you're not like the all other Caucasian girls. And their jokes, maybe when you were younger were funny. And then now, then they're sitting here and they're in, their
We
20s and they're
share, we
still,
can share some jokes, maybe not jokes about everything,
look,
but we can
if
share
they're in their
some.
20s and like, oh my God, let me see your hair, let me touch your hair. And you're like, look,
It's like, well, that's so funny because I really screwed up my hair in law school because I straightened it too much. I lost so much hair because I was trying to force my hair to be something it didn't want to be. And now I'm like, damn it. No, but no, you're totally right.
it's now, and I'll put this caveat to that. If you're African American and you don't know what you want to be, like professionally,
Hmm.
go to an HBCU.
Okay.
Because then you'll be around a culture and an environment and you'll see so many different colors of Black people, like internal colors, like as far as like not what you see on TV, and everybody's not hood, everybody's not talking this way, acting this way. Like you have some, we're diverse in
Back
our
in
culture.
05, 06, when I was in LA, I remember there was this big thing among like sort of semi-famous like former child actors who were Black. They
Mhm.
were I can't think of their names, but so it wasn't specifically anybody. It wasn't like specifically Tatiana Ali or like anyone, but like that I can think of that. But it was people like that who were sort of on TV, on like a popular Black TV show, and they must not have been big stars, and otherwise their names will pop out to me. But it didn't. But they had a clique where they were complaining a lot how they did not like shows on VH1 or like Love and Hip Hop and whatever during that time. They were complaining about the advent of things like that. And because they were complaining that all it was everybody acting ghetto, everybody throwing drinks at each other, everybody fighting. They were complaining, and it's horrible representation. And there's a whole generation that's growing up where that's so much of what they're seeing, and it's such rubbish.
Yeah, it's true. All right, it's
But
true.
but I
But
feel
that's
like that
inside.
things got
That's
better.
not
Things got
outside.
better. Huh?
That's inside the house, not outside. Right? So you don't got to air out your dirty laundry of what's inside the house,
Oh,
inside the
no, no.
culture.
All of those shows are such like fake reality, which means that they're hyped up. All those shows are so
Mhm.
hyped up because it's almost like getting people to behave badly on purpose and putting on television. Who make her talk about this, now get a fight. Or make that do that, so they'll get a fight. But it's really entertaining. And
Mhm.
I guess the argument is like, it's not that it's bad, but it's just bad if that's all there is.
Well, so
It's not that
so
that stuff's bad, but if that's all there is, that's not really good image
well,
for
but
kids growing up.
I guess you got to think of it like this too, right? Like, again, community, right?
Yeah.
So you had, that representation from your family to know that
Mhm.
you could be higher ed, right? If you're in an environment and all you see that you can be is what's on TV,
Mhm.
that's what you're going to attract to.
Mhm.
The difference between, even in hip hop culture, right? Like hip hop culture for Black people identifies who I am,
Mhm.
right? Identifies like a representation of something I can connect with in my culture. White people look at hip hop as entertainment.
Entertainment. They detach from it a little bit and they're
Yeah,
amused.
for
Hmm.
for African Americans, hip hop is identity.
Hmm.
For Africans, hip hop is entertainment. It's not identity. It's not who you are. It's not who you're told to be. It's not no, like you see it, they look like you, it sounds good, cool, but it's not going to cause you to act like that. for us, because we have no cultural identification, no connection to like, you know, a long-standing family, like that becomes who we are. That becomes what we can do, right? Like, you know, what we see is that the most successful African Americans or Black folk, they're entertainers, right? Like even President Barack Obama, right? Um, there's no relation that I have to Barack to motivate me, except for he looks like me and he was president. But like you said earlier, Cornell, everybody had perfect SATs. So for you to be in Harvard, you had to have some type of background and family support that pushed you to excel to be better.
Well, he was a legacy kid. So his kid is a Harvard, his father was a Harvard grad as well. So his dad was a Harvard grad from Kenya.
Mm.
So he's probably, so it was probably easier for him to get in. And his kids are legacy kids too. Not that they're not brilliant. That's the thing. It's not fair to say like legacy kids are not brilliant, because they are, because they come from brilliant people. So a lot of them are smart because they come from smart. So,
but think about that. His dad was a legacy from Kenya. So imagine the disconnection.
well,
If you
once
don't
you
have that
have a
legacy.
parent or family that's graduated from a certain university, then you're like, then your kids or relatives, or you become legacy of that university.
No, I
So they always,
understand that. I understand that, but his dad knew how to get him into that school. So
he
for
didn't have to
me,
do anything. He just, I think his dad was deceased by the time he went.
yeah, but so for
But you
me,
can put up, but you get to put on your application. So they always ask
yeah,
on your application, did, like there's a legacy question. Does
right,
anybody in your family graduate from this university? Because they're trying to give preference to families that are already part of the whatever.
right.
Sometimes to some
So
degree, only a little, I mean, I don't know how much, but so I'm just saying that that was part of, so, and also just knowing that, forget the idea of any sort of application rubbish, knowing that you had a dad that went to Harvard is a big deal. Like you grew up with a different mind than kids who didn't know.
so again,
Oh my
when
God.
I look at me and my parents are blue collar. So
Oh my
like
God.
Barack is great, but I couldn't get into Harvard.
You could if your dad went to Harvard and you thought about that every day when you were growing up.
Let's again rewind it. So let's take a difference of, you know, let's take a difference of African Americans versus international students. Like what you can be is blue collar, but you see higher, but you don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
Barack, he saw what his dad was, he could be, and he knew that this is what I can do. This is, you know, there was a little bit more exposure. And
And
that's
the white side of his family and the white side is her, which is his mother. They were like, all right, yeah, let's take you to private schools. Let's do that. And you know, so they both came together where like it turned out well. It was gonna turn out pretty good. Even if he didn't become president, even if he didn't become, it was
good. Yeah.
it was a good
Yeah.
setup. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if it
Yeah.
was a good setup for a decent amount of success. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And
All
not
those
everyone has that
positivities.
background.
Huh?
Not everyone has that
Background.
background,
Yeah.
you know, so you can, you know, you can look at other people, other cultures, you can look at, you know, but really it comes down to, there was something I heard not a while ago, and it was like this Asian student, he was doing really bad in class, and like he was stressing out about it, like he just couldn't get whatever, it was like a math class or something, like statistics. And, you know, like the professor pulled him aside and said, hey, you know, what's going on? You know, I know you're struggling in this, you know, but why are you so stressed out about this? And he was like, look, you know, my college degree, my family's depending on this. Like, you know, this is like my legacy, like for my family, like my respect of, we don't have that same, you know, input about school, like that our parents, our family are depending on us. It's no, we're told we have to do this to get to the next level.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, it's all about just growing as a community, growing the psyche to focus on these things more. And as you do that, it's just going to get better and better and better. And the next generation is going to do better, and the next generation is going to do better. As long as we just care about the right things and we zone in on these things, we zone in on the right issues, and we don't get caught up in getting divided amongst each other. Like, I think that, like, you know, like, because it doesn't, it's unnecessary and counterproductive, because sometimes we, you know, it's very easy to, when you are, especially, when somebody is Black and a unicorn, it's not all like because of they have a certain career or certain, it's not only the white people that make them a unicorn, it's also sometimes other Black people too. They give them a hard time sometimes too. And the benefit that you can draw from these people is immense if you would just let it be a benefit, and because once you put people like that on the defensive, you think you're diminishing them, but you're kind of diminishing the community too. Because now everything that they could contribute to you, you've kind of boxed it over here. And everything just, it just compartmentalizes everybody even more. And sometimes it's hard not to be that way. It's hard for us not to become sort of saboteurs of one another, because we always feel like the room to be something is small. There's only so many jobs for a Black this or actor or a lawyer or whatever. And so the incentive for people to be like, who's this Johnny come lately and what do they need to think they are, and to take and to oppose them is really easy, and sometimes that's because people who want to screw you over, like maybe certain white people may play that up. In other words, they may tend to play you up against each other because they realize that it's easy to convince you that, like, oh, there's only so much room for so many of you guys, so you better not, push them out, because once that Johnny come lately makes this, then you're not going to be as much that, and then you're not going to be right. And so we tend to go into that. But I think that the cure-all for that sort of thing is to look at things more holistically and just look at the fact that it's not just about you and what you make, but the whole community, I guess, and what's the next generation gonna get out of it, and what's the next generation. So important. I think when people look at things that way more, maybe it leads them to make the right decisions more and make more healthy decisions, and decisions that are not just on that just don't get caught up in drama and I feel this thing, that don't get caught up in that.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's hard, right? What we see going on right now is America, again, is taking another step on the backs of African Americans.
All right. Bringing them along with it, getting them to agree to go along with it.
No. It all comes to diversity and inclusion, and what that truly means now.
Okay.
So diversity and inclusion by law was protected in 1964, the Title VII Act, right? So that was for African Americans, to make sure that there was more, there was jobs for African Americans and so forth. That expanded. And now what was to protect African Americans and to make sure we had job opportunities goes to ageism, making sure we're protecting working people that are older, goes to LGBT community, making sure that, that's included as diversity. Women, making sure women have jobs and equal pay, that goes to diversity. So now when you look at what diversity truly means, what was protected, now everybody has those same protections because of the interpretation of law. African Americans, 1964 Title VII Act, were a disadvantaged class, which, if we break that terminology now, women, disadvantaged class, people above 40, disadvantaged class, international, disadvantaged class, right? So now you have these opportunities, these companies that are looking for diversity and inclusion, they want to bring on more disadvantaged classes. But now it's not about just how many Black people I have. It's about, do I have LGBTQ? Do I have a triple header, right? Do I have a woman that is African American and a part of the LGBTQ community, right? And above 40. I have somebody that's diverse in that alone, right? So, when and I tell my students this, right? So when you go into applying for corporate America now, before it was, almost like they had to hire you as an African American. Now they just choose who fits in that diversity class, and that solves whatever that Title VII, act was for diversity and inclusion. So it's like, as we continue to progress,
it gets lost in you guys' battle gets lost in the shuffle. You want to know why? because there's nothing legal that defines it. So I'll give you an example. One thing that, we're not supposed to talk about reparations until we had more people. We're supposed to have a big group. So one of the things that I'm actually kind of into this, that I actually kind of pro it, is that I don't necessarily care for cash transfers, like sort of, giving people money versus, but like scholarships, like things that are like by definition set by the government for that purpose. Because I completely agree with you that as time goes on, like that it's gonna get lost in the shuffle, and that it has been. And so when people meet me, well, they don't know whether or not I'm from, well, maybe they do now, but for a long time, for most of my life, they didn't necessarily know that I was from Africa, or whether I was, American descendants of the slave era. They don't necessarily know that right off the bat. And that helps me a lot, because I can sort of tap into where your perspective is, because it's the perspective that that is imposed upon me at many times until, I mean, I think more so now people know that, but I think that a lot of times when I was up, they didn't necessarily know that, especially post-college, whatever. So when I had a case, a hearing that I did, that I was a Social Security disability attorney for in Tucson, Arizona. And I was in front of a judge. She's very like loudmouth and very like, she's impossible. I don't know how, like, she makes the clients cry. But what I like about her is there's like a directness, and I'm always wanting to gauge the sense of people. So I like people who are blunt a lot, because then I can kind of pick up on the emotion. And so there was a claimant there that was a Native guy. He's mixed looked, he is part Native and part Black, right? So yeah. And so what she did was, this was my client, right? This was a client that I came in with. So she saw me in with this client, but she didn't assign. As soon as he told her that he was Native American, she was like, "Oh, you didn't say that. We have all the," I fucking kid you not. She said, "Oh, you didn't say that. We have this for you, and that, and that, and that, and that." And she treated it with a certain amount of reverence. And I thought to myself, well, I want that for his Black side too. Yeah. And I don't understand why that side of him doesn't get it. Yeah. And his American, he's mixed, right? I told you, right? And I'm like, wow, yeah, she treated with so much reverence automatically as a claimant that, coming into her courtroom was like, she was kind of like, "Oh, you didn't say that." Like, no wonder Black people advertise with their mixed with so much. I'm just kidding.
Seriously. No, seriously.
I'm kidding.
No, that's the truth.
But anyway, she was going on that. I guess I really didn't like that. I didn't like that she automatically, assigned reverence an amount of like, "Oh, we have this to compensate for you. Like, you are in this category that requires me to do this for." What about the fact that the other half of him is the side that went through the freaking slave era? You don't have anything for that? I just didn't like that. It just rubbed me the wrong way. It didn't, and it didn't sit well with me. And I thought about that a lot after that. And I thought, what happens is this: when you don't make people pay for anything, or you don't designate any, there's no scholarship for American, designated by the government. Forget like scholarships that companies do, that private sector does. Yeah. There's nothing earmarked for it by any state government or anything. It doesn't have to be a cash. Whenever people ask for reparations, they bitch about it. They're like, "Oh, why do you want another handout? You want more welfare." No, I don't. Because I don't, and I'm not entitled to it, because I'm not, you can kick me out of it, because I came here like, on a plane, like, when I was a kid, because my parents dragged me here, fine, whatever. But the point of it is, I feel like there should be things that the government had put in. There should have been a long time ago. How do you tell someone they can't go to school and then tell them, "Oh, now you can," and be like, it's their job to compensate for all that? Why don't you have like, incentives and scholarships and stuff earmarked into the fucking federal government? Why don't you do stuff like that? They always try to get out of it. They always try to get out of it with the issue of welfare. "Oh, we just want more welfare." No, they don't. Mm-hmm. That's not it. You do other stuff that's not that. Stuff that requires you to like write an essay for it. I don't even care. Yes, when you graduate, you have to write a 10-page essay. But when you do that essay, you better fucking be entitled to that scholarship. That's what I want to see. I want to see loan forgiveness when they graduate from college. I want to see a certain amount of loan forgiveness when you're out from law school. I want to see a certain, because they fucking deserve it. Mm-hmm. And so screw the whole like, "Oh, they just want welfare this, you're not entitled to it." No, nobody's asking for a cash transfer.
Right. And
Because as you get more people in, as you get more, I mean, diversity means so much these days. Like you just said, you guys end up feeling as if like what, you get pushed aside when they're trying to include all these people. And it becomes sort of divisive too, because it incentivizes you guys to not necessarily like it when it's somebody that's Asian that's getting this, or it's somebody that's an international Black person that's getting that. It's not healthy.
Right.
But let's get back to my real point. I feel as if they never really did anything officially to compensate for that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they have to do that because it's about respect, period.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, nobody's asking for welfare. Nobody's asking for whatever. Make it stuff that the person grows into, that the kids of whatever, the descendants of the, make it, like I said, like scholarships, like loan forgiveness out of college, make it stuff like that.
Well, or
I'm sorry, I get
No, you're fine. Or if they were to designate it like, we go by numbers, right? So if you're in a location that is a primarily African American location, then government funding should be earmarked to your community, period. And then that funding supports education, supports STEM growth, supports scholarships. It does, it becomes challenging because you say, okay, who gets what, right? But when you really look back at just history, what we lost the most is land. In land, that's the most important thing we have.
I was playing around with the idea of them giving, just designating, kind of like how they have Navajo reservations and things like that. I was playing around with the idea of them literally just earmarking land, say for example, around in Tulsa, Oklahoma, around like Black Wall Street and whatever, and just making that, and just making that like.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story.
That one's not, that's like maybe
that's a whole nother story.
Because it just seems really difficult to manage. And I like simpler stuff like scholarships, like loan forgiveness, because that seems more, you also have to think about how much is going to go into managing whatever the heck it is that is decided to be done. And that seems like a harder angle to manage.
Why I say that's a whole nother story is because so when you go back to the slave trade, there were some, Indians were involved in that. Right. It was just the difference was that African or that Caucasians treated their slaves differently than what the Indians did. So when you look at
Tulsa, Indians played both sides. They had slaves sometimes, but they were slaves before the Black people were slaves. In other words, the Indian people that were in this continent were enslaved first, but they didn't. So they were like dying. They couldn't do the work. So They went to get some Black strong people. So they went to get some Black people from the continent. You're right. They ended up being slave owners too, but they've been the Native community played both parts in the sense that at some point they were actually the initial slaves, but then they ended up being slave owners.
Part of the trade.
Yeah, they ended up being part of the trade at a later point. So
when you bring up Tulsa, Oklahoma, there was a piece of like slave trade through that migration. I believe through Cherokee and like 6 tribes, I believe. And they migrated into Oklahoma and so forth, right? When you look at Tulsa, Oklahoma, the question that comes to is, what happened to the community where 10,000 African-American residents lived? My fiance and I, we just went out there 3 months ago. And when you drive to the old community, when I say Beverly Hills times 10, crazy. Estates. Everywhere estates, all the houses, Beverly Hills times 10.
That's awesome.
So no, it's not, because what happened is,
no, dude, that sounds like something like, okay, so you have an area and it has so much rich history and all this stuff happened there. And I am a white person and I'm like, that's so cool. I love that. I love that it has so much history. I want my $1 million mansion to go there. Like, of course, places like that become gentrified because they have such sexy appeal.
No. So the poor whites attacked the African-American community.
I know that.
Took over. So when I say the challenge of that community, apparently we're talking about Oklahoma. There's a lot of oil.
Mm.
So the community that was taken over, all of them, now it's all estates. I would guarantee you that there's something that has to do with land and
Mhm.
oil. And during that time with Tulsa, Oklahoma, that was like the oil trade was not international.
Mhm.
So what was displaced and then now replaced
Mhm.
is wealth,
Mhm.
the poor white families. Shit, it's happening in Africa now with Chinese. The Chinese are bringing and taking over Africa. They're doing the same exact thing. They're just not being as carnaging. They're literally taking it over for money.
They're building a lot of infrastructure in Africa.
And that's the next place. That why do you think, oh, Africa, like they're calling for the African diaspora to come back because so much is coming through business now. And again, when I say we're behind, we're so behind the curve to see what's going on. And then let's talk about numbers. We've been consistently paired. We represent 12% of this country for a long time. The growing threat is not African Americans. The growing threat that's going to take over America in 2050 is Latinos.
Mhm.
If you look at previous to 1980, Latinos were allowed to select that they were Caucasian.
Mhm.
Before 1980, it was bad. Latinos didn't teach, like they tried not to speak English or try not to speak Spanish because it was a disadvantage.
Mhm.
A lot of children between the 1970s to 1990s, their family, their parents, they didn't teach them Spanish because it was looked at as a disadvantage.
Mhm.
Now, when you look at what's growing, what's happening, and again, the numbers statistically were wrong
Mhm.
because Hispanic or Latinos could mark themselves as Caucasian.
Mhm.
Now, 2050, who's going to be the majority in America?
Mhm.
Latinos.
Yeah, that's been the trend.
And Africans have been 12%. We're not the problem. We never have been.
Mhm.
The problem is they've been continuously stifling our growth,
Mhm.
breaking up our families, breaking up that,
Oh,
well,
so that's where you're coming. I'm like, well, who cares why you're bringing this up? So I think what you're trying to say, your whole angle is that the tendency to beat up on Black people is not necessary because
well, no, we're going back to reparations, right? So like they're talking about reparations.
right, you're
And
basically saying like it's not asking too much for them to be more. You're saying it's not asking too much, and the tendency to be like the unfairness is ridiculous, and it doesn't make sense because they should be more threatened by the growth of the other minority group. And so why are they like, yeah.
it goes to a whole nother, again, conversation and it really it's based off of color more than race,
Mhm.
right? Like light skin versus dark skin, pale skin versus dark skin,
Mhm.
holistically, right?
So you
Like,
think that's just what it is? There's a tendency to feel like intimidated by the Black people because they are Black.
well, America and England give preferential treatment to white, right? And you could be white, I mean, you could be white, but Latino.
Yeah.
You still get preferential treatment just by how you look. Until you open your mouth, you are a ghetto Black woman. Until you
Me?
open your mouth.
Oh my God. I'm so trying.
Until you open your mouth,
I'm trying
right?
to open
Like
my mouth.
you have to open your mouth to basically say that you're somebody different than what perception says you are.
We have so many issues. I talk to you. You're like, until you open your mouth, you are a ghetto Black woman. I heard that when I was growing up. When I talk to Nigerian people, oh, the Fulanis in the north, to them you are a slave. To them you are not human. You know. It's like, why are Black men always trying to tell me that I am a slave? I'm just kidding.
No, no, and I'm
I
not
know,
speaking.
dude.
I'm not
I'm playing.
speaking to
That's
you.
not a good
Yeah,
joke. Actually,
yeah,
that
yeah.
was
No,
me
no.
trying to
I'm
be.
not speaking to you. I'm speaking
That
to
was
the
me trying to
culture.
be Chris Rock, which was bad. That was not funny.
You know,
I'm gonna throw that away. That wasn't funny.
I'm speaking more or less to the we judge books by a cover. We judge
Yeah.
every book by a cover.
No, you guys just are saying that the world is has a lot of bitter issues. And that's all you're saying.
So, you bring back, again, going back to reparations, going back to who you give that to, going back to even the research. You talked about Tulsa, Oklahoma. Like, really what it comes down to is you don't give money, you give land. But the reason you have to give money is because that land is being taxed. That land needs to be developed. That land, but if you just, I can give you 40 acres and a mule. What are you going to do with it? You're going to
Yeah.
build a house? Okay, but what money? What's your job? Right?
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's why if you really think about it, like they give land to, some of the land that they did give away to the Native Americans or not. It's not the best land. It's not really like arable or like, they can't really plant a lot of, it's not really vegetation on it. Although those guys would usually live in desert, but I know what you're saying. It doesn't necessarily go far.
Yeah.
But they have a lot of other stuff like scholarships and things like that. I'd like to see stuff like that earmarked for the African American community. I would like that amount of respect assigned to the role you guys played in history, that it's spoken, because I noticed that when that doesn't happen, when there's no respect put on it, that intentionally and written in, it becomes like, oh, you're so and so because this is the kind of stuff you are, and this is the kind of stuff you complain about. Like it almost becomes your fault.
Yeah.
The history almost becomes your fault when there's nothing done to say we did you wrong in this way. And because of that, there's these measures that everybody knows about. If you guys never do anything like that, it becomes your fault. And it becomes like, because that's why there's so much of like, that's why it's like, why don't we call them like whatever in texting? Why don't we call them shida da da da? Why don't we call them da 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 da? Because they realize that these people have certain disadvantage, issues sometimes. But a lot of that is not really their fault. It's a result of like, if it was their fault, it wouldn't be so easy for Africans coming from Africa to do so much better. They have the same skin, they have the same blood. Why is there a difference? There's a difference because of like a lot of the way the history channeled things. That's the real big difference.
Well, and it comes down to community, right? So like,
yeah,
and it's why I do what I do.
Yeah.
If we're going to fix Black society, we have to fix Black business.
Yeah.
People to survive in
Yeah.
America need jobs.
Yeah.
If my jobs are all by corporate or Caucasian dominated companies that I go to, then how is the community really ever going to support and thrive? Like, how can you have a Black community that doesn't have strong Black businesses, right? Like, people have to work somewhere, so this is why Hispanic or Latinos and why Asians do so well. They start up businesses and they employ their own.
They do?
Oh yeah, hands down. You ever go, everywhere, there's Chinatown everywhere you go.
That's true. But a lot of that is not really like real, like whatever business. A lot of that is just like whatchamacallit, like nail shops, like restaurants and stuff like that.
Way more.
Well, I guess they have like lawyer centers and like doctors' offices and chiropractors offices.
Remember, going back to your example, you have an issue, your sister talks to that person. So in your culture, in your family, you can
and we can handle certain things.
This person,
we can handle certain business, certain matters. We can,
yeah, and again, when you look at our communities, what's the thing that we're missing? Is truly like Black-owned businesses.
There's a lot of them too. There's a lot of Black-owned business in Atlanta. There's a lot of Black-owned business in certain cities.
We with exclusion of Tyler Perry, we start our own jobs, so we don't got to work for somebody. But then when it comes down to passing that business down, you can't pass a job to somebody. And a business.
Explain what you're trying to say.
So if I'd say we're mostly more in the service-based businesses. So we're plumbers, we're restaurant owners, we're painters, construction, like we're into that type of industry.
What difference does it make?
Who do you hire? Like Procter and Gamble, Johnson and Johnson. They're hiring millions of people. Look at their executive leadership teams. Caucasian men. Like a Black owned business, because of the culture, the society you're answering to, you're most likely going to hire
Hire
a
white
Black
people.
leadership team,
You're gonna hire what?
a Black leadership team.
Yeah.
And that now trickles down, right, to more opportunity, more advantages
Or
for the community.
mhm, mhm,
You know, it's all based off of jobs.
mhm,
If you don't have jobs, you can't do nothing.
mhm,
Going back to slavery, how did they abolish slavery?
mhm,
They basically abolished slavery and they made it illegal
mhm,
to be homeless. So if you were on the streets, they made slavery legal in jail, and that was only it. So if
mhm,
you were homeless, if you didn't have a job, you went to jail,
mhm,
back into slavery.
mhm.
So it all stems down to providing jobs.
Yeah.
And Black businesses that provide jobs.
Mhm.
How many Black businesses are you aware of that actually hire?
I mean,
More
you're
than
right.
four
There's,
people. More than four people.
mhm, yeah. You're basically saying that they end up being smaller businesses that have like, 5, 10 people working for them. And then mostly like, it's like a service business that doesn't really, that's not a big company that hires a lot of people. Um, I can think of one, I can think of a yeah, I mean, yeah, I know what you mean, but I wonder if like, if when the companies get that big, what if they don't find the talent that they're looking for? What if they don't find like a lot of Black talent that they're looking for? Do they end up hiring like outside too?
The world will never know until it happens.
Well, they have some. They have some. I'm just trying to think of
Yeah, but
of um,
you can name one, but I can name 100 Caucasian companies
you know,
off top of head without even have to verify if it's Caucasian owned or not.
mhm,
The numbers say who's in leadership, who is in executive positions. It's more Caucasian men than anything else.
yeah. I see what you mean that the more we have like business owners and stuff like that, the more we have people that invest energy in trying to hire and trying to have um African Americans in the business and everything.
I'm gonna ask you a question. You're in Atlanta
Hmm.
on a
I
month.
don't go out much. I'm not as that in tune to this business community as much as I
Hear
should.
me out. On a monthly basis, how many Black businesses do you support?
I do. I'm not. I don't know.
You said you know one that hires Black people, so I would imagine that that would be one business you support.
Oh, I guess like uh
So when we talk about jobs and preparing
I feel
communities,
like the businesses I patronize, though, businesses I go to though are like restaurants and like a hair store or like stuff like that. It's real basic, you know.
don't need to hire.
They still need to hire.
They don't need to hire.
They don't, yeah. Companies like that don't need to hire a lot of people. They only need like 3 employees or something and they're good. So yeah, I don't know.
Stumped you there.
Yeah, I mean, it would be really cool to see us to see more people get involved in like, having things like nursing home facilities and things like that. There's a lot of Nigerians that get into that in certain parts of the country where they have like, they hire a lot of nurses and they'll have a lot of like nursing assistants to help in a nursing home and things like that. It'd be really cool to see. So they get into stuff like that.
Nigerians are known for working like Jamaicans. Nigerians have 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 jobs.
Yeah, or businesses or what.
For
Yeah,
a
yeah, that's
purpose,
true.
for the
Yeah,
family, for the college, putting their kids
yeah,
to college, not just because they want to be balling out and making a lot of money. No, that goes somewhere.
yeah. This world's not easy though. There's a lot of pressure. Um, yeah, there's a lot of things that
I
yeah.
like
Well,
that. I like
it's good.
that. I stumped you on that one.
Yeah, no, it's good to talk to you about. It's good to talk to you about these things. Let's keep up these conversations. Let's just like talk again another time. So, are you excited about are you excited about your week? What are you guys doing?
Well, I actually got to get ready to hop off because I have a award ceremony to go to.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think
What
I'm gonna
kind of
do
award
a
ceremony
award.
is it?
So there's a Black Professional Alliance,
Oh, that's awesome.
and they're honoring the local chapter members. So one of my VP of education is
Okay.
the dean of the School of Business over here at Houston Tillotson University.
Okay.
So they're going to honor him. So I'll be
Okay.
introducing him, and then they'll honor him with an award for whatever, I forget the title of it and all that, but
That sounds
I got to
brilliant.
prepare for that.
That
But
sounds
anyway,
brilliant. Well, that
yeah.
sounds like a good way to spend the rest of your day. All right.
Still
God bless
working,
you.
still
God bless you.
working.
Thanks for chatting with me.
Yes, yes, yes. God bless you as well. And I
All
look
right.
forward to our next call.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Have
You
a
have a
good
great one.
day. Have
And
fun.
I want you to take notes on what we talked about, please, on
Well,
what
I'll
you're
listen to.
thinking, on what
Okay.
you're thinking, because I know I stumped you with a lot. Like you kind of, like I could see you were thinking,
Okay.
you're processing. So let me
All
know what
right.
you're processing and let's have a conversation after that.
All right. God bless you. Take care.
God bless you. Have a great one.
You too.
Thank you.
Mhm.